First of all, I want to say very good evening to all of you, and thank you very much for having me here to speak with you. It's a privilege to be able to meet all of you and for you to listen to us. I am a lawyer by profession, by training, and I spent 25 years in the practice of law. I was with the firm Allen & Gladhill. I used to do disputes, which means that I was a litigator. I went to court, I did arbitrations, and that kind of work. And then later on, I was persuaded to join the government. I felt that it was a really natural step for me from what I used to do, from being involved in the law to being in a position to make legal policy, and to really find a place for us, for myself and the team that Prime Minister has assembled to shape Singapore, to think about Singapore, to think long-term for Singapore and Singaporeans, to confront today's issues, but always have an eye on what the longer-term vision ought to be. So I made the jump, now is it 8.5, 9 years ago now, and I've been in the government since. I took up my current role. I've been in the law ministry for about, for all the time, so about 8 years I've been in the law ministry, but I took over from the previous law minister last year, and I am also the second minister for Home Affairs, which looks after internal security. Last term of government, I was the minister for culture, arts, sports, heritage, language, youths. I mean, it was, Mark is laughing at me because I think he was in Parliament when we did a lot of good work, really promoting sports, culture, all forms of diversity of Singapore. And that was what really excited me. That portfolio was a very exciting one, very busy, but very exciting one. And one which allowed me to connect with myself, my own roots, my own heritage. And it was a really invaluable 5 years that I spent at the Ministry of Culture, Community and Youth, MCCY.
Wow, you sound incredibly busy. How many hours of sleep do you get a day?
Not enough. So go easy on me.
Okay, will do. So I think for all the Singaporeans in the room, I think we all know you very, keenly, intimately, right? I think many of us, including myself, all follow you on Instagram, on TikTok as well. If you don't mind, yes, your TikTok is very cute, very funny. And I would love also for all of our ASEAN friends to also get to know you on a more personal level. Right? Can you share us a little bit about your personal self and maybe one fun fact?
Actually, I'm not that funny. Sometimes you have a personality on TikTok, you do some things, there's some trends you follow, and I've got a very good team helping me, look at trends and so on. So I'm not really funny. For me, I'm quite a casual person. So, I don't really like formality so much. And I enjoy sports, I enjoy football, I like cycling, and I'm a mad football fan. Yeah, Manchester United. Yeah. So now not so good, huh? I used to, when I was younger, I used to stay up at night, middle of the night to get up to watch the games and, cheer on and so on. Now, if I need to sleep, I watch them. Yeah, so quite different. I've got 3 kids, 3 girls, grown up already. So, every time I look at them, it's a reminder of how old I am because I still think they're babies or young kids, but they're so grown up, so which must mean that I'm so much older. In my spare time, whatever time I have, there's not much. So I spend time with my family. We treasure those moments. I like watching movies, actually. So my last few movies was Project Hail Mary. I don't know how many of you watched it. It was really very good. And of course, I'm like many of you, I'm probably a Netflix binger as well. Yeah, so I watch lots of Netflix shows. And and I enjoy live sports. So from time to time, I'll go and catch the football at the stadium. I was at Jalan Besar Stadium a few nights ago. And I enjoy supporting local sports. I think there's something about local sports that really excites me because it's our fellow countrymen. It's something that is on a world stage. And, the human endeavor is just so powerful in sports. It's something that I really champion very much.
So, if you don't mind me asking, so who were you rooting for this past World Cup?
The World Cup was, I didn't really have a team because I didn't really follow. I've always been a fan of Holland, but this time around, I think very quickly after 2 weeks, they were out, so I didn't follow so much.
I Okay, okay. And I found out yesterday at our cocktail drinks, right, at High House, that you also do play tennis. And Vishal, who's one of our committee members, he has played tennis matches with you. And you're not bad.
No, Dion told me this earlier, but I said Vishal must be hallucinating because I definitely don't play tennis, let alone play it well. So must be a different person, you know.
Okay, I think we need to do probably a YBLN matchup to
Yeah.
see. Yeah, so I think maybe now, I think going into a bit more of a serious section as well. Right? I think over the next 36 minutes now we have left, we're here to talk about how we can better equip the next generation of leaders to navigate trade disruption, get sharper and more agile as markets shift, and use ASEAN, right, as a launch pad for regional and global growth. We will also love to learn, of course, from your leadership journey, which I think is quite unique, right, especially as you move from private, right, as you shared, to public sector. So a couple of quick fire questions, maybe just to warm us up first, right? And you can answer in one word, yeah? Since we don't really have that much time left.
Stress.
If you can, if not under 5. Okay, question 1. How would you describe yourself as a leader?
Collegiate. I like to consult people a lot.
Oh, very good word. Okay, question 2. What comes to mind when you think of ASEAN and the next generation?
Exciting, energetic, hopeful, aspiring.
Wow, that's 4 words. Okay,
Yeah, I
thank
kept
you.
it within 5.
I know, good job. Okay, question 3, last one. What do you hope to achieve out of today's dialogue?
That I can share whatever I can with you and that it will be useful for you and that you go back, you know, appreciating something as opposed to thinking, today, what a waste of time. Yeah, so hopefully that I can achieve that.
Okay, we will both try our best. Okay, so you were at the top, right, Singapore law firm, Allen and Gledhill, for 24 years, 25, sorry, you mentioned 25 years. And you shared, of course, right, you left to join the government, and just now you said you were persuaded. Can you take us back, though? What was the actual moment, or was there a particular moment or conversation that convinced you that government was where you could have more impact, right, than in the courtroom?
Well, before I actually took the plunge and joined the government, I was already a backbencher. I was first elected as an MP in 2011. So I served as an MP, and you know, in Singapore, you serve as an MP as a backbencher, you hold your day job. So I continued being a lawyer. I went to court. And a few years later, several more senior ministers spoke with me and said, you know, is it time that you can think of contributing on a bigger stage, on a different platform, and one which allows you to make policy? And I remember a conversation with one of the senior ministers, and it went like this. It was, you know, when you are in practice as a lawyer, of course, you use your skills, you use the law, and you use your arguments, and you champion one cause, and you focus on it, you go to court, you make your arguments, and you want to win. But imagine if you can use those same skill sets with a little bit more, with a more broader dimension, with a far greater emphasis on public interest, and make the same points, but now you have the ability not just to argue within the law, but to make the law. And that to me was a very valuable proposition, and one which really attracted me to make that jump. Because, you know, in Singapore, we're a small country, we don't have natural resources, we rely on our people a lot, and the framework for business, for social compact, for people to progress from one generation to another, to do better in education, in housing, in healthcare, and so on, really is the framework that we set up in government in Singapore. And for an opportunity to play a part in doing that, it was really once in a lifetime. So it was a difficult decision to leave practice because I spent so long in it, and I spent all my 25 years in one firm. I never left the employment of my firm. So it was difficult to leave. But in the end, now looking back 8-9 years after I've left, I haven't regretted it. And I think this is something that is richly fulfilling. And it sounds cliche, but actually a small privileged few get a chance to serve in this capacity. And I'm so glad I can do it.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, after 25 years and then making that switch, right, was there a lawyer instinct or perhaps maybe a habit you had to unlearn once you were in cabinet?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things my wife said to me, my wife is also a lawyer, by the way. So she said to me, the first thing you've got to do now is shut up and listen. because you as a lawyer, you tend to talk too much and you try to make your points. And I think that has been one of the most invaluable lessons, because it's true. When you want to make policy, when you affect the lives of so many people, and often there are trade-offs in almost everything that we do, then you've got to make sure that you understand deeply. You understand carefully what are the needs, and when you serve the majority needs, there might be a minority impact, and you need to understand that carefully. And we need to understand whether that trade-off is worth it, and whether it is too big a trade-off to make. And so a lot of it starts with listening, which is a very important lesson for us as policymakers, for us in government, that we cannot always make a decision that will be favorable to everyone. In fact, that will be quite impossible. But we can assure our people that we will never make a decision without having heard from everyone. It's different, but I think it is still meaningful to be able to do that and say that we do that for every policy that we do. So, insofar as we look at changes, we want to impact society. We have a segment of society, say the legal industry, that we want to impact. Then we make sure that we understand the issues and we understand the impact of changes that will be made on their lives and livelihoods.
Do you mind maybe sharing us an example of a policy change, right, that you effected, that you felt was most formative, right? Maybe also for you, right, personally?
Well, I started at the Ministry of Health. So one of the projects I was given at the start was to look at the rare diseases in Singapore. And rare diseases means the chance of getting it is 0.000 something %. But if you catch that disease, if you have that disease, sometimes it is genetic, sometimes it is not, then the person's likelihood of a long survivor period is very low. Or the likelihood of enjoying quality of life will be very low. So the consequences would be devastating. The chance of occurring, very low. And so we asked ourselves, how do we help this group? Because on the one hand, you've got public funds that, if you look at funds as being limited, it ought to go to the majority needs of the population. That's what taxpayers' money is for. But at the same time, you have a small group, very small group, but for which the problems were extraordinarily, non-commensurately serious. So we had to have a trade-off in this. And in the end, I think we found a way around it by setting up a fund. We had some seed money, but we then went around and we found a solution in making sure that we had publicity, awareness. We stepped up on public education. We found ways in which we could alert people about this, and then attracted private sector funding to support the initial seed funding that government put in. And through that, I think we have been able to slowly expand coverage. I cited this because it was one of the early projects I did when I joined government, but one which still stays with me because it's an example of how impact may not be very widespread because it's a very small group. But for everyone within that group, it makes a world of difference. And oftentimes, it's really a difference between life and death for that small group. And I think these are the kinds of things which, stays with me because, if we didn't do this, many of these families will not be able to afford treatment. And that would have been devastating.
Thank you for that. And I think as a Singaporean, I'm deeply grateful. I think after studying also in the US, you start appreciating a lot of the policies, right? I think the thought, the considerateness that goes into, right? I think all these different decisions. So I appreciate it. Just a quick call out. We are actually winging it. I asked him earlier in the holding room and I said, hey, how do you want to go with this fireside? You said casual. We didn't even go through the questions. So now we're really just going off the rails already. You're doing very well for very little sleep, by the way. I appreciate it. So segue into sort of the next section as well, right? I think we're here with us today also with many, of course, business leaders, many next generation as well business leaders. And of course, they will be keen, right, to hear your insights on how businesses can navigate, this uncertain economic order amidst all of the ongoing trade tensions as well. So, I think if trade rules are being rewritten in real time, how should how should all of us be rethinking our risk and strategy to remain competitive and resilient today?
Well, first, I want to give a shout out to all of these young business leaders. I think, first of all, the work that you do is important, innovative, vibrant, keeps our economy buzzing. And I think, if I may say this, you're all in ASEAN operating in perhaps the most exciting region in the world today. And let me explain why. If you look around the world, I think you have tensions. The US is the US. Europe has its difficulties with the EU and so on. Parts of Asia, I think Middle East has its recent conflicts, parts of Asia as well. But in ASEAN, I think you find a region that is fast growing. First of all, its population is young. 660 million population, 65% of this population is 35 years or younger. It's a bit different from Singapore, which is about the other way around. But it's a young, vibrant population, one that is very digitally connected, very entrepreneurial. And I would say the level of foreign direct investments going into ASEAN has been strong. And the level of development in many of the countries has been very good, very progressive. So we are looking at a region that I think has tremendous potential in the years to come. And I believe that ASEAN, along with China, Japan, India, will form the core of the top 5 or 6 economies in the world. And that will happen sooner rather than later. Which therefore means that in time to come, the businesses that you are setting up, that you're operating, that you are going to build across networks across ASEAN, will thrive in that environment, will begin to thrive in that environment. Now, there are a couple of caveats, I think. Number one, I think we have to accept that change and uncertainty will be the new order of the day. I mean, our Prime Minister has been saying that the only thing that we know for sure is that it'll be uncertain. So we have to adapt to that, which means that your businesses needs to be more resilient for the long term. You've got to build in a level of resilience to cater to changes in the geopolitical space, in laws, in climates, and so on. Second, you I think will be looking at the possibility of hopefully greater regional integration. I think that is something that will benefit all of us across the board. It's probably easier said than done because we are different countries with different legal systems and different levels of advancement and also different interests because each of the countries are built differently. We have different strengths and different weaknesses. So it's not as coherent. But therein lies my third point, which is actually we have strength in diversity. There's a strong diversity in ASEAN that I think is unparalleled in language, in culture, in ethnicity, in religion, in language. All of these things make us different, but collectively, as a single ASEAN unit, can be very strong. So I think you are business leaders, young business leaders, about to enter the core or the peak of your careers at a time when ASEAN will thrive. I think it's, which is why I chose the word, exciting and energetic or energizing earlier, because I think that's exactly what it is. You have a tremendous opportunity and you're going into a time and into a region that I think is probably second to none.
Okay, well, then flip side. What's the one strategic mistake you'll probably tell, right, a young founder or operator in the room to avoid, right, given how also uncertain, right, global trade has become?
I think that the temptation today, because of the tariffs, because of the shifting winds in policies, in laws, the temptation is to be close, is to be very introspective and to just deal with partners on a bilateral basis and to find ways to, the phrase friendshore or reshore. So you're looking at someone who is friendly to you and try and do it bilaterally. I think there's a great temptation to do that, but I would hope that businesses that can expand and keep open do precisely that. Because we need to be as open as possible. To give you an illustration, as a small country, Singapore's posture is to keep ourselves open. In some ways, we have no choice because we rely on so many other countries for a range of different things. We import 90% of what we consume, so we really have no choice but to be open. But even for companies, in the way in which you build your networks, the way in which you build your contacts, locate your assets, have counterparties, or have multiple other subcontractors in your value chain, keep as open as possible because that open posture is important. Much as the world's sentiment today is encouraging you to be close and to be a little bit more bilateral, I feel that you need to be open. So keep that in mind.
Thank you for that. And of course, I think behind a lot of the uncertainty and change, right, I think that's affected everyone. I mean, AI is also, I think, one of the key reasons, and of course, a key maybe buzzword. I guess I've heard it mentioned in like the last few panels as well. I think so. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about this. The Singapore government has also signaled, of course, the strategic importance of AI. PM Wong chairing the new National AI Council. So as AI reshapes the business landscape, how should next generation leaders step up to lead and mobilize their teams, right, to harness their potential?
Well, AI is the disruptor of our generation, especially for industries like the law, for example, which is very knowledge-based. In knowledge and document-intensive industries will be more easily disrupted by AI. But the reality is that AI is everywhere. I was recently in a conference and someone made a remark that, you know, AI is so pervasive. AI doesn't just affect one thing. It doesn't just disrupt your business. AI is like electricity. It affects everything. And I think that's what we should expect AI to become. It will seep into everything that we do, how we work, we play, and how we do business. So for business leaders and likewise, you know, in the legal industry, I've been sharing with leaders of the legal industry that the decision on AI is not a tech decision. You can't tell your IT guy or your IT manager to decide on AI for you. What is the best product? What is the best tech engine to incorporate and so on. It's not a tech decision. AI is actually truly a business decision. You've got to decide whether your business is able to integrate the AI effectively and make it work for your business, your own workflow, and not assume that the moment you buy the best tech product out there, that automatically you are a tech company or that you are AI enabled. It is not. So we have to make sure that we adopt AI in a very calibrated fashion, but also one which fits the particular purpose of your own industry and the way in which you work. So to give you an illustration, you know, lawyers and tech don't quite get along. They're not the best of friends. Yeah, you know, and until COVID happened and lawyers were forced to really go on Zoom and Skype and so on, I think tech was really quite far from us, even for me when I was a lawyer. But recently, there's a lot more tech adoption because of COVID and also because we've been really in their year about, you know, sort of telling them if you don't adopt it, you know, we will be in trouble. So there's been a bit more adoption. But having done that, I think sometimes the temptation is, as I said, go out there and look at what's the most fancy tech and buy it and say, okay, we are now tech ready. So I've made the point to law firms, and my colleagues at MinLaw have said, we will help you with tech, not just with funding, but more importantly with a competency diagnosis first, to see, first of all, whether you should be tech-enabled, and if so, how, and then which one. And once you choose one, we'll help you to integrate it in your workflow. Because no two firms are made up in the same way. And so it's about adoption in a more careful, calibrated, and one which takes into account the particular nuances and characteristics of your own business. And I think that's most important.
I totally agree with that, right? And I think it also starts first from the top as well, right? That I think leadership, management really needs to just have the mindset as well, and that willingness, right, to even sort of try, and then to continue on that journey as well. Curious also, I think just to hear your perspective on this, you know, I think where do you think maybe businesses are getting also AI wrong, specifically also overhyping it?
Well, I think AI is helpful where you can harness it, where you can use it to advantage. But at the end of the day, I think the value proposition for lawyers and also for many of the businesses that you must be involved in, that human dimension cannot be absent. You can't substitute it with an AI. You can be a lot more efficient, but that person-to-person connection, the way in which you market your product, the way in which you sell something to a client, and sometimes what you sell to a client is not a plug-and-play product. You've got to integrate it with the rest of what the client is doing. All of that can be assisted by AI, but really should be fronted by the human person. Because the human judgment when it comes to making a commercial call, understanding the needs of your client, that intuition or instinct that you've honed over many years in your business, that doesn't go away with AI. In fact, we should sharpen that aspect of what you can offer to your client with the benefit of AI supporting your other work. Because that will be what distinguishes you from the other company, from the other business operator, or from the other product supplier. The fact that you understand deeply the client's needs, understand their strategic purposes in buying a product or not buying a product, and then being able to make judgment, have instinct, have business intuition, all of that roll into one, being able to service your clients in that way. So I hope that we don't lose sight of that. That's a very important element of the human touch, even in the age of AI.
Yeah, I mean, I must say also, I mean, even for us, right, I think at Love Bonito, I think even with, all of this around, consumers are really craving community, connection, experiences, right? They're going to the malls, they're going shopping, right? I think they still want to meet, right, at certain events. So I think that's becoming even more meaningful, right, over time. Actually, then maybe for yourself as well, right? I think how have you found AI? How has it changed actually how you lead and how you decide and how you operate on a day-to-day?
Well, you heard me say just now that lawyers and tech are not the best of friends. So I'm not the best of friends with tech as well. Although in the last couple of years, I've really tried to get onto it, tried to understand it a bit more. I've done study trips overseas to visit some of the leading tech suppliers and providers. So it's influenced me in that way. It's influenced me in the way I think about work and also the way we organize our ministry and our workflows. But I must say that I think it's far from satisfactory at this point in time. There's so much more to learn. And just as you think you master something, there's a new product on stream, right? I read somewhere that, with all these new tech AI platforms, Gen AI platforms, whether it's Claude or DeepSeek or ChatGPT or Gemini, Perplexity, and you have so many, right? None of them, whichever version it is, stays at number one for more than an average of 37 days, which means slightly over a month each time someone else overtakes them. And that's the speed of development. So there's so much more to learn, but each time you think you've come to grips with it, there's a new version. And I just think that it's a constant learning process, and we must keep an open mind, and we must evolve with the advent of technology. Otherwise, we'll be left behind.
Actually, are ministers allowed to use tools like Claude?
Yeah, it's in my phone, Claude,
okay.
ChatGPT, Perplexity. I must say that one of the biggest advocates of AI usage is our Prime Minister. And he's, every once in a while at our meetings, he will say, I have designed this bot which can do this. And it saved me a lot of time. And of course, he puts many of us to shame because, I don't know how to design a bot, right? And he can do that, And so I think he's been pushing, very active, of course, publicly, which you've seen, but also behind the scenes, pushing the public service to adopt AI, to be a lot more tech savvy, to be more efficient using it, and really to ensure that we are not that we remain a 21st century government. So he's been a very big promoter of that, which is why you see he's the chairman of the National AI Council. And he doesn't chair many across the board committees, of course, but this one he takes a personal interest. So I think as a country we do need to do something about it. And you can see in the last budget he's announced incentives for every citizen to be on AI. And I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you for sharing. And maybe just, I think also just wrapping it up a little bit, right? I think before we open the floor to Q&A, beyond the strategy, the policy, right? I think, what do you think, what mental models, values, or instincts, right, must the next generation of ASEAN business leaders carry, right, to be successful?
Well, as I said, you are going into an era of uncertainty, geopolitical, geoeconomic uncertainty. So that mental model of flexibility, adaptability, to roll with the punches, to accept that there will be change, and to accept that there will be a degree of unpredictability that will affect your business, and then price it into and build it into your business model. I think that's important. Because if you don't have that resiliency, you could be very well derailed, or overturned with changes in the landscape, number one. Number two, I think it's important to build a culture within a business. A strong culture, one that is very people-oriented, people-centric. And again, to borrow from the legal industry, I made a speech yesterday, and one of the points I made to them was this. I said, nowadays it's very fashionable to be work from home. right? Everyone you want to hire asks you, can I work from home? And it's of course important to have some flexibility in your work schedules nowadays. But remember that actually working in the office and being in the company of your colleagues in the office is itself a plus, especially when you're a young employee, when you're still learning, when you're still trying to come to grips with the industry, learning from people who are your peers, who are a little bit older than you, where you can walk into someone's cubicle and ask a stupid question and nobody will laugh at you. I mean, you can't really ask a stupid question on email, right? Because, I mean, it's on email. So you tend not to. Okay, some do still, but you tend not to, right? So it's very hard to learn if you can't ask a stupid question, especially when you're a young employee. So if I was a business owner, I would build a culture of a workplace that is open, that is very present in person, that allows people to build relations. Go back to what I said just now. I spent 25 years with one employer, and it is because, not so much because, you know, the office is nice or that there's good work and so on. All that is important, but really it's about the people around me. The people around you will be the most important indicator of whether you stay long-term in one employer or not. So again, if I was a business employer, I would look out for that, you know, the well-being of individuals and the workplace culture. The last thing I guess I would do is what I said just now, build a network that spans across ASEAN, because each of the ASEAN countries have value propositions that might be different from the other. And if you have the reach and the breadth and the ability, then look at ASEAN, pan-ASEAN, because I think that's really something that will be a step in the right direction for regional integration.
25 years with one employer is really no joke. I don't think many millennials can actually attest to even staying like 10 years.
Yeah, when I tell millennials this, even Gen Zers, I tell them this, they look at me like I'm from Mars. It's like, what's wrong with you? You know?
Yeah, no, you really struck a chord when you said also just the environment, working environment, right? Working from the office, you know. So I think we made everything very flexible. And to be honest, you lose, right? I think you lose a lot of that collaboration, but I totally agree with you. You lose the water cooler moments as well, right? And especially if you're a young analyst, you're an associate, you can't hear the conversations from your bosses, for example. And yes, every new joiner is so awkward on Slack, right? How can you just say hi randomly, right, to just your new colleagues also online, which is a bit strange. And you just lose that bond, right, which also then affects, right, I think the team camaraderie, especially when it comes to going through hard times, right, together. No, thank you for sharing that. I think a very good reminder, right, I think to all of us as well. So I think we have 9 more minutes left. So I think at this point, I would love to open the floor to questions. So for those of you who have a burning question, I think you can raise your hand, and then we will be walking over to you with a mic. So when you do, please introduce yourself by sharing your name and organization first. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwin, for sharing. So I'm Ricky Lin. Good to see you again. And yeah, today representing SBF, Young Business Leader Network. You know, so amongst the audience, when we are hearing you share, I think I can't help, since we are the next gen business leaders, right? You talk about AI. Is that a foreseeable future where we are able to see a virtual version of you or a humanoid, where you say that one of the key things about politicians is to really listen. And honestly, you see AI, they are able to listen very well, have a very thorough analysis, assessment, before they make a policy or recommendation. So if we are saying that Singapore is leading this wave, adopting AI, do you see that that is a possibility we could push that frontier where politics could even involve, a virtual version of a politician? Since you also talk about, we should also sort of listen more, take the human out of the human touch, if that's what politician is, but be able to put in a little bit more database or in terms of more holistic, consideration making policies. So I'm not sure whether that will be a loaded question for you.
I don't know whether you really want a humanoid of me. I think some people
in case you didn't know, a lot of us see you as a very humanistic lawyer, right? Yeah. Become a minister of law, obviously. So, yes.
Well, thank you for that. But I would say this, okay? I think it's important to embed AI in what we do, because if not, you'll be left behind. As I said, it helps you organize, process data, information, and so on. But the interfacing, I feel still has to be a deeply human one, because there is a reaction and a reaction to a reaction that humans can judge. And take, for example, what I said just now about consulting with people who are affected, maybe adversely affected by a policy. When we have to say no to them and it impacts them, there is a range of emotions that go on, that they react with. Some will be very angry, some will be very sad, some somewhat in between, others become reserved, some speak a lot. And we have to judge what's the right response to give. And every week when I do my MPS, my Meet the People sessions, I see a lot of those cases. We see 30, 40 of them every week. And when we tell them what can or cannot be done, there's a range of different reactions. Now, my AI can help me with processing the information and the data and getting the right policies, the right grants, and so on, pulling up all the information. But ultimately, it should be me conveying it to them and then explaining what more they can do, if at all. And I think that ought not leave us, I hope. I mean, maybe I sound old-fashioned, I don't know, but I feel that that part of our society, we should cherish that human-to-human element and not let the AI take over all aspects of how we see one another and how we transact with one another. So I hope that answers your question. There was some here as well.
Oh, shall we take a question over here? Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. Thank you, Min Edwin. Always appreciate hearing your candid sharing. Cheryl here from the S&P Global Foundation. As you've mentioned, ASEAN has tremendous potential. However, economic integration, especially in the last 60 years, has been quite tricky. We haven't really seen much progress in unlocking that potential yet, due to a myriad of challenges, of course. So ASEAN celebrates 60 next year. Would the next season of ASEAN be different? Why and how? Next year, Singapore is also ASEAN chair. Would there be some key priority areas of work that you can share ahead of time?
If you look at regions around the world, I mean, the Union, the EU is one, and so on, and others, other bandings, you know, Baltic states and parts of the world, G7, G20, whatever you look at it, it's always taken some time to find its footing. Because you are bringing people from different cultures, different legal traditions, and different levels and different stages of development in their history together. And then to find a common platform, common market, common currency, there's a lot more there's a lot more negative than plus in the initial stages. So it's always harder in the early parts. Now, ASEAN has gone through, I think, that initial teething process to bring people together, to bring countries together. We are now in a second bound. You said 60 next year, right? And then beyond at 60. So 60 is a good enough time for there to be a leveling off of the differences. And remember, the first 60 years, many of the countries were independent or newly dependent in the first 60 years, finding their own feet, not yet developed. Even Singapore was struggling with so many other issues at that point in time. But now I think there is a certain level of maturity and readiness. And I would also dare say a level of acceptability to be more common, more integrated. I don't think we'll see a common market in the immediate future. I don't think that's not what I mean. But I will see a greater coherence of mindshare, of a determination to want to do things together, of cooperation, and of recognition of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and really playing to it. For example, if you go out there and you see, I was taken through some exhibits earlier. You can see that many of them span across ASEAN, and they leverage on the relative strengths of each of the ASEAN countries. Some are in Vietnam because, well, they have the skill sets, the expertise. Some are in parts of Indonesia for manpower. Other parts are in Malaysia for other reasons, and so on. So you can see that there is that level of maturity that you find now in ASEAN, and I believe the next 60 years, even if you don't see a complete unification, and maybe there are arguments against why that is not so good overall as well, but you will see a closer integration, and I think easier to do business right across ASEAN. I hope that answers your question, Cheryl. On Singapore as ASEAN chair, well, we are stepping in at a time of great conflict in the world, but also tremendous opportunity in the way I've outlined earlier. So we are preparing, we are excited to be able to take the helm again. And we have a couple of plans along the way. At some point later this year, we'll foreshadow that with some announcements. But the idea really is to use the opportunity to play our part, to bring that, to foster cohesion, bring it closer together, and also find ways in which we can allow both our companies, our businesses, our entities in Singapore to flourish in ASEAN, and also the other way around, for ASEAN businesses, those interested to be in Singapore and present in Singapore as well.
Thank you so much. I guess we have time for one last question. I see a very eager hand that's been up there in the middle. Okay, thank you.
Hello. Hi, Minister. My name is Alan. I'm a Singaporean living in Japan and running an AI technology company. I think ASEAN faces, or many countries faces, two trends. One is an aging population, and another is the rapid rise of AI. AI can help offset a lot of the labor shortages, but many young people actually worry that they don't have opportunities as AI become more and more capable. So my question is, how do we strike the balance between embracing AI to improve productivity while at the same time ensuring that the next generation continues to have a meaningful career opportunity in future?
Well, AI, of course, is, I mentioned just now, the technology disruptor of our generation. But let me remind the younger people in this audience that once upon a time, there wasn't even email. When I first came into the workforce, there was no email. Okay, it shows my age. I used the common mode of communication when I first came into practice. I see Kim Huat there, so Kim Huat probably knows. Is the telex. You know what's the telex?
No, I do not.
Yeah, you have no idea, right? Because you're all, young people. Telex, then it became the fax, and then there was email. So the email was a game changer because you now can communicate without having to write a letter. And that was, of course, a serious game changer because instead of taking 3 days to get a letter across, it would now be in 3 minutes. And then we had the device called the BlackBerry. Do you all remember the BlackBerry? The BlackBerry was, again, a game changer, and I thought, my goodness, this is the peak of evolution because I can send an email from the beach or anywhere I like, and my boss would think that I'm in the office. So I thought it was a game changer until I quickly realized that if I can send that email, my boss also can send me the email from wherever he is. So, I tell this sort of partly as a joke, but partly also to remind all of us that we've always confronted technology. We've always seen advancements, some bigger, some smaller. And the human spirit, so far, has always triumphed, has always marshaled it, controlled it, and used it for ourselves. And I believe that that will be the case for AI. In areas which AI can help us in, it will help. As I said, document information processing, organization, getting information, doing things for you agentically, and so on. It will happen. And it will reshape the workforce, yes. But it won't replace the human. It will replace some jobs, many jobs, but it won't replace the human. And I think that it allows us to go up the value chain. Again, using a lawyer example. What I started doing when I was a young lawyer was literally on my hands and knees, organizing documents. I no longer need to do that because I used to spend my first year doing that. Now, a first-year lawyer doesn't do that because AI can help. But that lawyer can now spend his or her time doing higher value work, go up the value chain, do more direct client-facing work, see your clients more, do more research into your clients as opposed to into the law, understand your clients' needs a bit more, be more strategic, go for courses, for example, to improve yourself on management of firms, management of practices. So there's a range of things that you can do where you allow yourself to go up the value chain because AI is there to help you. And I believe that will happen. So it's a question of how we marshal it, how we take control of it, and how we overcome it and integrate it into our workflow, as I said earlier, than to let it control us and replace our jobs.
Wow, Thank you, Minister Edwin. That was very, very inspiring. I think we've reached the end. So if I can quickly summarize as well, right? I think what you shared, honestly, I think that was a masterclass. I think in what you shared. When it comes to AI, right? I think embrace it, lean in, right? Don't lean out. Change, right? I think is a new normal, right? I think we all have to be comfortable, right? I think with that uncertainty, we all have to be agile. We have to all be flexible, right? I think leadership as well today isn't about sticking to an old playbook, right? It's adjusting, listening, right? Really leaning in and then just being flexible, right? I think as you move along. And, I think before we close, right? I think you've already shared us so many nuggets of wisdom, but if you could leave us all in this room with one sentence, what would it be?
I think it would be this: be bold, be innovative, and don't be afraid to fail. Because in today's times, sorry, 3 sentences, Ken. Because in today's times, the temptation is to stick to the tried and tested. But because the environment around you is changing so turbulently, if you stick to the tried and tested, it will be in a very different landscape. So you must be prepared to try new things. And if you keep to just things that you're bound to succeed in, it must mean that they are not new things. So don't be afraid to fail. Pick yourself up, go again. But be prepared to be bold, innovative, and push the boundaries and be in a different landscape and never be afraid of that.
And with that, thank you, Minister Edwin, for your time, for your candor, and thank you, everyone, for all of the questions.
Thanks, Dion.
Thank you, Minister Tong
thank you.
and Dion.